Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today on the website of Amati Auctions based in the UK, we're going to have a look at one of their latest auctions, which is the Amati Affordable. So this is stuff which is kind of lower in value, stuff which maybe needs a bit of repair or unknown provenance, very similar to Terezio T2. This is mainly going to be bowed stringed instruments, so violins, violas, cellos and bows, and maybe some books and other stuff like that. I thought it'd just be good to have a look at it and see what's going on. So I think there's about 250 items or so in this auction, so a fair amount. So we'll just try and blitz through it as quickly as possible and see if there's anything interesting. This particular auction is finishing on the 6th of December. It's the 3rd today, so a few days left to go. Buyer's premium is 22%, so that's what you need to pay on top. Whatever the final hammer price is, 22% of that you need to pay as an additional charge. So bear in mind this is a UK based auction, so if you're looking to buy from outside of the UK, bear in mind import export fees might be CITES restrictions as well. So before we get into it, I'd just like to say if you do enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing, like or comment, because it really does help the channel quite a lot and would be much appreciated. So without further ado, because it's enough of me rambling, let's just get on and see what we have. We're not going to look at everything in super high detail, otherwise we'll be here forever. So first of all, a cello labelled Horst Gruner Penzberg 1980. Got a couple of bids on this so far. We can have a look at the images. Doesn't look like anything too crazy, but kind of clean work. We can also have a look at the condition report. A few closed cracks on the heel, that's an interesting one, and down at the lower bout, nothing too much to worry about. Looks fairly decent enough. I don't know anything about this maker or workshop, but it could well be a correct label. This could be a a workshop violin, a workshop cello of that period. So looks kind of fine so far. Cello unlabeled. Let's have a look at this one. Difficult to kind of know what's going on with this. I would suspect probably something from Eastern Europe or so, but not 100% sure. It does look like maybe the varnish has been altered a bit, but it's not 100% clear. There's nothing on the condition report to say that, so yeah, a bit of a curious one. Another cello unlabeled. This looks fairly standard. Let's see if we've got any details here. Okay, that's had some new wood here. It's got some open cracks, so do bear that in mind. You can see here, that's unfortunate. I mean, a good restorer can get that kind of repaired, but in this occasion I don't know if you would bother, but it could be an okay cello for kind of a student or something. This just looks like a modern half-size student cello, so we don't need to worry about that. A cello labelled Nebel and Bro. Okay, Nebel and Bro, manufacturers of violins, New York. Okay, interesting. That's current bid of 10 on this. Looks fairly generic, really. 3/4 Primavera. That's another trade cello. Half-size cello unlabelled. Let's have a look at this. See what we're on next. Cello unlabelled. This also looks fairly standard kind of trade stuff so far. This as well is going to be a modern thing. Let's have a look at this cello labelled illegibly. This I would suspect, but I could be wrong, is some kind of modern Chinese cello. Looks like it's had a soundpost crack on the front, which they're saying is closed. It's not been done very well in that case, but once again could be an opportunity for a budget cello for someone. Half-size Stentor, these are made in China. Half-size cello, let's have a look at this. That's actually not a bad looking half-size cello there. Well, yeah, £550. It's quite nice. You can see quite nice workmanship there, so that will do well. Interesting. Small cello labelled Leslie Shepherd, Sussex. It's one of these big kind of importers of instruments. Leslie Shepherd, you see loads of instruments like that. A slightly odd looking one, and lots of problems on this cello. Very odd, kind of narrow upper bout here and wider lower bout. It's a bit of a odd model. It's a kind of standard trade instrument there. That's a Chinese cello unlabelled. 130 bid on this. Once again, I think this is probably not a bad instrument. 130 the current bid on that. Cello unlabelled again. Let's see. That I think is a fairly standard kind of German cello, I would think. Cello unlabelled. Okay, would think that's possibly Eastern European or something, but I'm just guessing really. Cello unlabelled. Once again, this looks like a standard trade instrument there. 3/4 cello unlabelled. Also looks like it's probably German. Cello unlabelled. A lot more cellos than I actually thought there'd be in this auction. Once again, I think a lot of this is fairly standard stuff. Another cello here. Yeah, I think it's fairly standard. Another Leslie Shepherd one from a different place though, but yeah, big importers of instruments. Actually looks okay, that cello. W. Thompson, another one of these kind of big importers as well. See lots of these instruments with those labels as well. Cello labelled Joseph Jan Dvorak Luby. Looks like a very low end trade instrument, that one. Cello unlabelled. I think that's not too bad. It's had a lot of work done. Another cello unlabelled here. Another Leslie Shepherd here. Wow, that one's actually not too bad either. Bass viol labelled Neil Hansford 1978, so something a little bit different. So the largest of the viol family here. Interesting outline there. Well, it is what it is. Right, we're on to bows now. Silver mounted cello bow unbranded. Bid 40. Silver mounted cello bow branded Alfred Knoll. Nickel mounted cello bow unbranded. Silver mounted 3/4 size cello bow. Nickel mounted cello bow unbranded. Silver mounted half size cello bow unbranded. Nickel mounted viola bow unbranded. Silver mounted violin bow unbranded. And let's have a look at this. Okay. Nickel mounted violin bow banded PC. Interesting. Nickel mounted violin bow branded FN Vorin. Silver mounted violin bow branded Bausch. Nickel mounted violin bow unbranded. Silver mounted violin bow unbranded. Nickel mounted violin bow unbranded. Nothing super exciting so far. Another unbranded there. Silver mounted violin bow branded Dodd. Okay, not sure if that is silver mounted, to be honest. Later adjuster, so I think maybe that's not silver mounted. Nickel mounted 3/4 size violin bow. Nickel mounted 3/4 size violin bow. Half size. A Baroque violin bow branded Otto Derschmidt. These are these kind of older type Baroque bows that I don't think are necessarily that great, to be honest. Silver mounted violin bow. Another silver mounted violin bow. And again, nickel mounted. Let's have a look at this one. Silver mounted violin bow, unbranded. Looks like something going on here. Let's have a look at the condition report. It's showing some kind of repaired cracks on there, so always worth looking at the condition reports on these. Silver mounted violin bow branded GOTS. Right, we're on to violas. A viola labelled Derek Vaughan. Looks quite a bright colour there. Let's have a look what the dimensions are. 410, that's not bad. 20 bid on it. Looks in pretty good condition. Another viola labelled Derek Vaughan. This one looks slightly nicer, not too bad. 130 bid on that. Have a look at this. 410, yeah, it's pretty good modern size. Another Derek Vaughan one. We've got a whole load in here. Let's just check what the size is. 410, okay. See a pattern appearing here. Right, another one. Wow, okay. Yeah, it looks fairly decent. 408 on that one. Viola labelled Luigi Bassano, okay. $412 on that. A viola unlabelled. Okay, let's have a look at this. It looks kind of okay, fairly neat work there. 10 to 20. Viola labelled Derek Vaughan. Okay, wow, that's quite yellow. Look quite nice woods used on that. 410 again. Viola labelled Derek Vaughan. This time not varnished, but looks like quite a nice instrument. Might be a good project for someone. Let's just check the length of back. 400. Viola labelled Roderick Paysold. Okay, so this is just your standard trade viola there. Viola labelled Franz Sadner. Once again, another trade instrument, a bit better than the previous one. Viola labelled Christian Hoffman. Once again, another trade instrument, potentially a little bit better again. Viola inscribed internally illegibly. Kind of interesting looking instrument, this one. What's the size though? 385. It is quite small, but nevertheless interesting. Has the Romberg on. Viola unlabelled. This again does look a bit more like a workshop viola. Another viola here. Viola labelled Antonius Stradivarius. That's definitely a trade one there. Viola unlabelled. Yeah, just standard stuff here. Viola labelled Robert Peterson. That looks like a very amateur made viola. 420 though, well, might be usable to someone. Small viola labelled Cavalli Luigi. Okay. 378, and that is really very small. A violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Right, we're on to violins now. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff which is the usual. Violin unlabelled. Let's see this. Difficult to know. Violin labelled William Lauher. Interesting back on it. Violin branded Duke. You just get a lot of these trade violins with those Duke stamps. Violin labelled Carlo Antonio Testore. Looks like some low-end German trade violin. A violin labelled Guarneri del Gesù. Well, it's definitely in that kind of style. Looks presumed to be Chinese of some kind. bench copy, antique edition, infinite strings. Okay. A violin labelled Thibaut. Curious F holes. I presume that those have been adjusted. Let's see. Not saying anything on here. It's like some worm traces. Let's see if we can see that a bit more. Something going on there anyway. Yeah, unusual F holes those. Violin unlabelled. I think this is your standard 19th century trade violin there. Violin labelled Beer and Sons, Barzoni. Standard trade instrument there. Violin unlabelled. Once again, standard stuff, I think. Violin unlabelled. Once again, trade stuff. I mean, it's really difficult to tell actually from photos, so it's quite possible that it's easy to make mistakes about things without seeing them in person. So always best to view in person if you can. It's just hard to guess from photos sometimes. Violin labelled Martin Swan, so an import from somewhere. Violin unlabelled. I think Martin Swan, I think they were made in Romania from what I've read online. Child size violin, we can ignore that. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Yes, has some interesting bits about it. Stentor, we know that. Violin labelled Dear Love. Kind of curious wood choice there. An interesting scroll. I would assume that this is some kind of trade violin, but I could be wrong. Violin labelled Joseph Klotz. Definitely another 19th century trade thing. Violin unlabelled. Pretty crazy F holes on this. I mean, quite bonkers F holes, but I think this is still, as far as I would think, a trade violin, even though it's got these really crazy F holes. They come in all kind of shapes and sizes. Right, a 7/8 violin, which has loads more pictures up. That's interesting. Wonder why that is. Just looks, maybe it's of the scroll is pretty mashed up, isn't it? That's unfortunate. 3/4 size violin, unlabelled. I think we can ignore that for now. Violin unlabelled. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just going to be trade stuff, so I wouldn't expect too many miracles. 3/4, we'll go past that. 3/4 again, it's all pretty standard. This is your standard trade stuff again. Violin labelled Joseph Klotz. Yep, pretty standard. Let's have a look at this one. I think, yeah, just different variations. Child size violin, get rid of that. That as well. Actually, let's have a look at this one quickly, because some of these child violins can be quite nice. That actually doesn't look too bad. Yeah, it looks like quite a nice child's violin. Stentor, we can ignore that, and that one, and that one. Can't really imagine that anyone's going to buy those, but you never know. Violin unlabelled. That looks like a bit of a state. Really bizarre kind of edge work on this, really heavy. That is in a bit of a difficult state, to say the least there. Violin labelled Bossi Carlo. Interesting fluting there on the F holes. Looks pretty modern though. Violin labelled Carolus Marizzi. Once again, F hole fluting there. Doesn't really mean anything though. See, not too bad kind of choice of wood there, but not super inspiring. 3/4 violin, you can get rid of that one. Violin labelled Nat Amati, just your standard trade stuff. Actually quite a nice back though, but standard fare. Violin labelled Hannibal Fagnola with this almost fluorescent varnish. Yeah, pretty bizarre looking thing. Violin labelled J. Heidi, so this is a kind of modern Chinese violin, I'd presume. They can be quite popular though. Violin unlabelled. Interesting corners on this one actually. It's got some interesting bits to the outline there. I would assume just another trade violin, but interesting corners on this one, to be honest, and the F-hole position actually. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Let's see, looks like your standard trade stuff. Violin labelled Vincenzo Galliano, kind of fairly nice back on that. I'd assume kind of Eastern European, but once again could be completely wrong. Violin unlabelled, curious F-holes there, almost, I don't know, I want to say some kind of Brescian-y type thing in terms of the F-holes. I don't no idea about the instrument. 3/4, we can skip that. Violin labelled Sebastian Klotz. Violin branded Hopf at the button. I think this is your typical 19th century style Hopf-ish thing. Violin unlabelled. Yeah, this looks like some maybe amateur thing. Child size violin, Medifino. These can actually be pretty good, these Medifino ones. Quite a nice outline. Yeah, it's not bad for a child's violin. Violin unlabelled. Yeah, it's pretty low tier stuff there. It's also looking a little bit rough. Violin labelled illegibly. It just looks like a not very good trade violin. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Yeah, just more trade stuff. Maidstone, yeah, it's just going to be standard again. 3/4, we can just ignore that for now. Medifino, some of those can be okay. 3/4. Violin inscribed 1816, pretty odd varnish colour there. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Derek Vaughan. Very similar bright varnish as to ones you saw earlier. Interesting model there. Violin labelled Wilhelm Thomas Jaurer. Okay. Violin unlabelled. This looks fairly standard. Violin labelled Enrico Politi. Okay. Looks fairly well made there. Let's just see what's the length of the back on that. 358. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Standard stuff. Violin labelled Gustav Bernadel. This actually looks fairly interesting. That kind of varnish. Really nice scroll there. I think that will do well, I would think. Let's just have a quick look there. 359 body length. Bit of repairs and stuff. This is a nice violin. I think one of the nicest ones so far. Let's not forget that Amati have this spinning viewer thing. I quite like that. I think that's not a bad violin. Not sure exactly what it is, but interesting. This is a curious lot. A violin labelled Georges Chanot, missing the front. Really interesting back on this. These kind of pins as well on either side. Yeah, it's very interesting. Really nice scroll as well. I think this will do pretty well. No top, missing fingerboard, no nuts. So there you go. It's a bit of a project for someone. I mean, 210 already. It's going pretty well. Violin labelled J. Levest. This one looks like the varnish is in a bit of a state. Violin labelled Charlotte Milot. I actually quite like this one for some reason. I think it's an interesting looking one. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Violin labelled Benvenuto Botturi. Interesting crackle to the varnish here in this one, like really heavy varnish on it. Yeah, kind of curious looking one, this one. Violin labelled Pierre Hell. See, not a bad looking instrument, to be honest. Violin labelled H.A. Radcliffe. This again looks like a kind of amateur-ish maker there, says number 3, Liverpool. Violin unlabelled. Medieval Fiddle labelled Neil Hansford, 1978, current bid 100. Certainly looks like that type of things. These aren't actually all that common, and probably to even buy one from the early music shop will cost you a few hundred or so it might be a good opportunity for someone to get one for a cheap enough price. Looks kind of interesting. Yeah, doesn't look too bad. Child size violin, we can ignore that for now. Violin branded Hopfer button. Yeah, it's just your low end trade stuff. 3/4 violin there. Violin labelled Christoph Leismiller. This is a kind of interesting looking violin on the back. I think this is, yeah, quite a curious one, but I think this is in a terrible state. Yeah, look at this, like half of the top is actually not original anymore, so it's a real kind of it's a real interesting looking one, so that's quite curious. You might hear some weird beeping at the back. Someone's deciding to have some beeping car horn argument outside for some reason, so apologies if you hear that. But yeah, I think this would have been a nice violin, but absolutely horrific patchwork of things going on now. Violin labelled Johann Reiter. This looks like your standard stuff as well. Violin labelled Joseph Antonio Rocca. This looks once again like your standard stuff, but you never know, because people make all sorts of bizarre stuff, and it might just get kind of passed off in the future as being a trade instrument, where it could have been like a genuine thing. It really is a difficult one. I've seen instruments that were definitely made by genuine individual makers that you would think were some kind of trade violin, so yeah, it's a difficult situation. This looks okay. Violin unlabelled. Another 3/4 again. Violin unlabelled. Amazing how close the purfling is there to the edge. Violin unlabelled. This is a slightly interesting looking one. Great wood there on the back. Slightly odd outline though. This is interesting as well, the way that this neck is shaped. Yeah, interesting looking violin. I quite like it actually. This one is pretty interesting. Violin unlabelled. This looks a bit like your Medifino kind of thing. Yeah, I don't think it's an awful instrument. Looks decent enough. Violin labelled Carlo Fisori. Violin labelled illegibly. Not too dissimilar to the other one. Violin labelled Caspar de Salo. Just standard trade thing, but these ones sometimes have this kind of quirky scroll with like a single turn, which I really like actually. I think they're great. Really cool design. Violin labelled Hopf. This looks like another one of those Hopf type instruments. Violin labelled B.E. Hood, Coventry. You can see a bit on the arching here. I think it probably is what it's labelled. It's just another amateur instrument. Violin labelled Nicholas Amatis. Okay. Violin labelled Middle Anatus. Okay. Not sure about that one. Violin labelled Francesco Ruggeri. Definitely 19th century kind of trade stuff. Or later. Violin unlabelled. So let's have a quick look at the scroll there. Violin unlabelled again. Violin branded Hopf at the button. A lot of these Hopf branded ones, that definitely looks one of those shaped ones. Violin labelled J.W. Owen. This again looks like some kind of amateurish stuff. Violin branded Panormo London at the button. Interesting choice of wood at the back. Yeah, it looks interesting enough. Violin, not 100% sure what it is. It looks like it might be quite long, but let's see. No, 354, it's just a bit deceptive. Violin labelled Jacobus Steiner. Yeah, standard trade stuff there. Failing to click the button there. Violin unlabelled. Yeah, difficult to know with some of this stuff. Violin unlabelled. Some of these violins are really simple. Just, yeah, it's difficult to really know. Violin labelled Luca Polis. Okay. Kind of interesting back there. It's got a massive sound post crack, I think, on the back there, which is unfortunate. Interesting corner work though, and quite nice. Yeah, quite nice wood choice there. Looks like it's, I don't know, it looks like it's got extra bits on the wings on the side. That's kind of an interesting looking violin, I think. Interesting scroll net graft. It's kind of slightly curious, but let's see what this says. Yeah, I mean, that is pretty bad. New wood near the end pin. I mean, yeah, it's in a bit of a state, whatever that is, but kind of interesting looking. Slightly curious. Lot 178, a violin labelled H. de Vonald. Once again, looks kind of amateur, some of the workmanship, but not to say that might not be a decent enough violin. 1991. Violin labelled Charles Tweedale. This is pretty bonkers looking thing on the varnish there. Kind of interesting scroll. Violin labelled Norman Boothroyd. Once again, seeing a lot of stuff that I think is probably amateur made. Violin, France, circa 1920. Okay. Rid 30. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. Violin branded Le Marquis de l'Air. Violin unlabelled. That looks like, yeah, pretty low tier modern thing. Violin labelled Nicholas Amatis. Looks like standard 19th century type thing. Let's see what else we got here. Violin labelled Alex Murdoch. A slightly curious looking thing, isn't it? Someone's been working on that one. 70. Alex Murdoch, Aberdeen, 1884. Yeah, could well be. It's got some charm, that. Once again, it'd be quite cool in a classical setup or something. I like these kind of moustache F-holes. They're kind of interesting. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled again. Chart size violin, get rid of that. And E star, we know that's going to be a super modern thing. Violin labelled repaired by W.H. Falconer. I think we might have seen this before in one of the auctions, so maybe it's reappeared again. It looks heavily over varnished there. It's possibly an interesting instrument at some point. Okay. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Nicholas Galliano. Violin unlabelled, slightly curious looking thing again. Pretty bonkers F-holes there, interesting scroll. Violin labelled illegibly, okay. Quite interesting back on that actually. Looks like inked purfling perhaps. Yeah, kind of curious looking. Strand, London, okay, interesting. Violin labelled James Barrett. Also looks fairly curious. Child size violin, unlabelled. Violin labelled Chen Zuhua, handmade by Master Maker. Okay, £100 on that. Wow, okay. Presume that someone actually knows what this is then. That's interesting. Violin in good condition. That's kind of curious. Interesting one to watch there. Violin unlabelled. Okay. Right, we're on to books here. Monograph stuff. Dictionary of Violin Bowmakers. Standard. 5 books on various stuff. 3 books. Heifetz book there. Italian violin makers. See that at time. Lutria Italiana. Secrets of Stradivari, Tuscan and Lemessi. Violin makers. International School of Cremona. British violin makers. Violin bridges book. Violin bridges 2. Viome book there. De Geigenbauer de Schweiz. Geigen and Geiger. Johann Onberg Violoncelli. From Violin Making to Music, Life and Works of Simone Fernando Sacconi, Dictionary of Contemporary Violin and Bow Makers, Violin and Old Violin Makers, Old Violins, Violin Making as it was, Old Violins, Violin Cello Building and Repairing, actually could be fairly interesting. Book, potentially it might be quite old. Sale of Stringed Instruments, Italian Violboo. Interesting. Stradivari, His Life in Instruments, Violins and Violinists, the Cuvée Darling Exhibition, Bows and Bow Makers by Retford, 2015 Cuvée Darling, Anton Summers, 22 Instruments of the Violin Family, okay, Nicholas Gilles, Mr. Black's Violins, Stradivari book, whole load of bows here, 22 violin bows. Loads more bows again, always worth kind of having a look if you're interested in bows. More bows there, 8 cello bows, more bows, violin case, another case, branded Gewa, another one there, 3 wooden violin cases, violin case branded Gorge, interesting, double violin case branded Jaeger, 100 on that, interesting, double violin case branded Vedudez, double violin case branded Jaeger, violin case branded Jaeger, violin case branded W.E. Hill, and a viola case. Viola case again, another viola case, a bow case with space for 24 bows, bow case for 36 bows, okay, cello case there, and another cello case. And that is it. I think that is the end of the auction. Well, there we go. That's the Amati affordable auction that we've just gone through fairly quickly. Actually, not too bad, to be honest, given there's quite a lot of lots. Fairly interesting auction, to be honest. A few curious things that I think are worth kind of watching. Some other stuff which is pretty generic, but we've seen worse auctions and we've seen better, so I think it's yeah, not a bad one, to be honest. So as always, I'll put a link in the description, check it out and see what you think. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao.